Welcome to All the Bright Things, the Prairie Art Brothers podcast about living the creative life in central Nebraska.
I'm Rick Brown.
And I'm Mark Fordori.
Our guest today is Twyla Hansen, who served as the Nebraska State Poet from 2013 to 2019. Her books include How to Live in the Heartland, 1992, Sanctuary Near Salt Creek, 2001, and Potato Soup, which won the Nebraska Book Award for Poetry in 2003. She collaborated with Linda Hasselstrom on Dirt Songs, a Plains duet, published in 2011. She lives and works in Lincoln, Nebraska. Welcome to All the Bright Things, Twyla.
Thank you.
And we ask you to come here and talk about a sense of place in your poetry, because I think that that's something that's very strong in your work.
Right.
Can you start off by describing how you came to recognize that aspect of your poetry?
Well, okay, so I grew up on a small farm in northeast Nebraska, and of course, place is everything when you're a kid, and especially one on a farm, or a small town, I think, is the same way. You're there, and you become very familiar with your surroundings, and I loved living on the farm. So I didn't know it at the time, though. Yeah, and in fact, when I was a teenager, I was ready to leave. I mean, I didn't want to live anywhere near that place, but I wish I had it now. I wish I still had that farm, but it got sold in the 60s, so it's no longer in the family.
And is that unique to a rural setting? Do you see that sense of place is strong in anywhere people live?
Well, it could be anywhere, really. Mm-hmm. But just growing up, I was familiar with the trees and the birds and the cattle and the barns and, just the fruit orchard and the chickens and everything that goes with a small, diversified farm, which isn't too common anymore. So when I started writing as an adult, I realized that should be something I start writing, because you write what you know about. And I knew about that farm, and I knew about how it changed over time there.
I think of Wright Morris in his photographs, if you're familiar with those. Mm-hmm. I grew up in northeast Nebraska, in Norfolk. Oh, okay. And to see his photographs brings back a nostalgia for me that I don't know anything about it, but it just brings back that sense of home.
Right.
And how you can overlook those things and feel so comfortable in a place.
Right, and he chose unusual objects, I think, sometimes to photograph, which, like a dresser that had a doily on it with all the little fancy hair tools or something like that. And combs and brushes and mirrors and just to pay attention to the details.
Things that we think we'll never forget.
Yeah.
And to have them isolated and brought back, can be very powerful.
Yeah.
And so when you were writing, are you especially aware of a sense of place in your work, or does it come just naturally?
Well, I'm pretty aware of a sense of place. And in fact, in most of my poems, I try to bring elements of nature into each poem I write. So I have like earth, sky, and water, just the basic elements of life. The senses come into my writing. So I am very aware of where I am when I'm writing it, if that's what I choose to write about.
Well, you didn't originally set out to write poetry. You were the grounds manager at Nebraska Wesleyan University. Tell us about that.
I was starting from scratch because it was a beautiful setting, but they didn't have much diversity on campus, and so it was like a palette. I could just fill in the color and shrubs and trees, and I did a lot of that. Mm-hmm. I also had to move snow and give out parking tickets. At the time, and have cars towed when they misbehaved.
I imagine that's a good way to lose friends.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Friends you never knew you had.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then where did writing fit into your...
Well, I learned how to write at Wesleyan. I mean, Bill Clefcorn became the state poet the year I started there. Before I even started there, I was reading poetry for some reason. And I went to the library and checked out his book with Ted Kuzer. It's called Cottonwood County. And there's just two sets of poems there. I mean, Ted's and Bill's, and I was blown away. I thought, wow, they're writing about all the stuff I knew as a kid, dirt and cattle and stuff, and I thought, maybe I could do that someday. But I took a class, and that's how it started. So,
well, I see you brought some poetry with you. Would you read something that talks about a sense of place?
This one's called The Moon Keeps Her Secrets. There was that ride home from town, the back seat of the old Chrysler, the sky navy dark, a vigilant moon following us, rounded, steady, silent. And the news, missing high school dropout, her body found near the road in the field we were about to pass when my brother yelled, "Boo!" and I screamed. How many times we'd passed that place not knowing. How many phases of moon crossed over it for months, the rain, the wind, the frozen snowdrifts. She lay where someone dumped her body next to the fence-line trees, where in spring a low sickle bar revealed her face, by then as blank as the witness moon. Afterward, the sheriff, state patrol, scuttlebutt. The field continued to grow alfalfa. My brother and his buddy found bits of hair, fiber, comb, dared each other to touch. Oldest homicide in the state unsolved. Somewhere, someone long gone by now knew what happened. The nightmare that rose up to an unblinking moon.
Beautiful. I was right there in the car with you. Yeah.
Well, anyway, so that
Very
was
nice.
It's important, I think, to write about something important.
Why?
Because you will have the strongest attachment to that. This is something I could never forget.
Yeah.
I wrote about her in my very first book, and it came up again.
And you have a platform.
Yeah.
To amplify her story. I mean, that seems like a good reason to explore this. That same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she was in one of my brother's classes, and she dropped out. And she lived with her grandmother, and her grandmother lived like a block south of Main Street. And so she was on Main Street. People saw her. She went into Little's Dry Goods, called her grandma, "I'll be home. I'm going to come home now." And she walked around the corner and then disappeared.
So where do poets get inspiration? What subjects work best for poetry?
Well, I think anything can be poetry. It's all around us if we just if we pay attention and listen to what's going on around us. I mean, it could be a snippet of a conversation that starts a poem. It could be a situation or a memory you had in the past. In my new book that's coming out this year, I go from present to the past in this book, and some of my poems are, set several decades ago. But I have something new, and I've written about this one I'm thinking of. I've written it before, but in a different way. And so you have to find something new to say. Everybody's trying to find something new to say as a writer.
Sometimes I think people have expectations of what a poem is, but it can be so many different things.
It can be, and it is so many things. I mean, it's like all kinds of poetry on the fringe, on the mainstream, just like everything else. Most people fall in the middle section. But I think it's words highly distilled. Cannot be said any other way. It's not just description. That's not a poem. But somehow the things you don't say matter. You don't want to explain too much. Come up to that line and stop. And then you leave the part of it to the reader.
Yeah, how do you know when to stop
Yeah,
a poem?
yeah.
Is that I have to pay for that information, don't I?
That's right.
It doesn't come free.
It's easy to step over that line. Make the ending memorable. So.
Mm-hmm. We've been talking to Twyla Hansen, who served as Nebraska State Poet from 2013 to 2019. This interview was recorded on March 8, 2022. All the Bright Things is produced and copyrighted by the Prairie Art Brothers and presented with the support of the Kearney Area Community Foundation.
Boy, that wind. I tell you, you guys got wind out here. It's windy in Lincoln, too.